Hey there guys, this is Cole. Welcome back to another video. Today's edition of 31 on 31 we're doing is ranking zombie movies. Now, for those of you guys who are not familiar with what 31 on 31 is, on October 31st of 2018, popular movie reviewer Cody Leach, he created the concept where every October 31st, him and a group of friends will rank 31 horror movies all together in one video on October 31st under a certain theme. And this year they chose zombie movies. So yeah, I will say, of all the movies we have on here, minus the exception of the bottom four, the rest of these movies I think are ranged from good to great. So yeah, overall this is a pretty good lineup of movies. Now, I'm not going to go over detail of all the movies on the list, but I'll list off a couple movies, but if you really want the full list, I'll put the full list in the description of the video, but here's some of the movies we have. Night of the Living Dead from 1968, The Crazies from 1973, the original Dawn of the Dead from the 70s, the original Day of the Dead, Re-Animator, The Serpent and the Rainbow, the original Pet Sematary from 1989, Pet Sematary 2, Braindead, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, both of the Zombieland movies, 28 Days Later trilogy, Dawn of the Dead remake, World War Z, Train to Busan, etc., all ranked together in one video. Now, again, I will put a link in the description down below for giving out the details of all the movies on this list, and I want to hear your ranking from you guys, or at least of the movies you've seen. But without further ado, let's get into my list. Now, coming in at number 31, bottom of the barrel, a movie that has gained a cult following, but it's a movie I've never really liked, and that is the 1992 sequel, Pet Sematary 2. Now, I actually do like the original Pet Sematary movie. You will see that higher on the list, but I've just never been a fan of this sequel. I do not like the comedic tone with this movie. I think its comedic tone does not really work. I also don't like how I don't really get into the story. I don't really get into the characters. I guess the only good thing I can say that this movie has going for it is there is some good practical effects, and at least this movie doesn't just try to copy the original, but even then, I've just never really liked this movie. And now we're not including the Pet Sematary remake on the list, or the prequel to the remake, because Cody Leach didn't include it. I'm just ranking the movies he has planned to rank, but which on the day I'm recording this, it's October 3rd, but I'll set a premiere for October 31st. But yeah, I've just never really been a big fan of this movie, and I'll give Pet Sematary 2 a 1.5 out of 10. Coming in at number 30 is going to be the 2008 found footage movie, Quarantine. Now, this is actually an American remake of a Spanish film called Rec, which you will see higher on the list. Now, when it comes to the whole found footage genre, I'm not really the biggest fan of found footage films. Now, there are a few exceptions, but overall, it's just not really a genre for me. And this movie's not really an exception to that. I think that most of the acting isn't that good in this movie. There's some really bad CGI in this movie, and the whole plot is nothing special because, well, the original Rec did it, and it did it first, but in my opinion, it did it much better, you know? I mean, heck, the fact that the 2007 Spanish film Rec came out in 2007, and the fact that Sony rushed this American remake out a year later, that was pretty much a sign that the movie was screwed. But the movie does have some good qualities to it. I do think that there is, you know, I do think that some of the blood in this movie is good. There is good production design, and I guess some of the choices of music are fine, but other than that, this is a pretty bad remake of a much better film, and I'm going to give Quarantine a 3 out of 10. Coming in at number 29 is going to be World War Z from 2013, starring Brad Pitt. Now, this is based on a popular book that came out in 2006, written by Max Brooks. Now, just recently, for the first time, I'm not far into it because it's like, now I listen to audiobooks and read books, but I'm listening to the audiobook of World War Z right now, and the audiobook is about 11 hours. On the day I'm recording this, I am 2 hours and 25 minutes into the audiobook. And so far, World War Z is a really good book from what I've listened to. It's basically a book about a guy who interviews people who survived zombie attacks, and the people so like I said, the premise of the book is about a guy who interviews people that were attacked by zombies and who survived, and they tell their stories to him, and we get to hear the perspective of the survivors from their point of view when they're talking to the interviewer. It's a really cool book. This movie completely misses the mark, however, though, and many fans of the book hated this film adaptation. And I do think World War Z could work if adapted right, but the thing is, with the way the book is structured, I think really the only way you can make this work, you would have to adapt this book as a TV series, where each episode starts with the interviewer interviewing people, and when the people are talking to the interviewer, we see their flashbacks, or maybe even as a mockumentary series. That's really the only way I would see a good World War Z adaptation being made. But yeah, now this movie does have its merits. I do think there is some good production design in the movie. I do think that the two kid actors who plays Brad Pitt's kids in this movie are good. And even though, once again, this movie misses the point of the book, the whole part where zombies attack on an airplane is not a bad sequence, but other than that, this is a pretty bad adaptation of the book. Once again, it completely messes up the whole story of the book. There's really bad CGI in this movie, and the whole ending of this movie is not very good either. So yeah, I'm going to give World War Z a 3 out of 10. Coming in at number 28, man, talk about a disappointment. Number 28 is going to be the movie Army of the Dead, the Netflix movie starring Dave Bautista. Now, this is a movie I was actually excited for because Zack Snyder, I have not liked all of his movies, but he's actually directed some movies I like. Movies like the Dawn of the Dead 2004 remake, which is on this list. He also directed movies like 300 and Watchmen, which I enjoyed those two movies. He also directed Legend of the Guardians, Owls of the Ga'Hoole, which is a pretty good kids movie. He also directed Man of Steel. Now, there was the terrible theatrical cut of Justice League, but but Zack Snyder was able to make his version, the director's cut, called Zack Snyder's Justice League. So, Zack Snyder has done some stuff as a director I like, but this movie isn't one of them. And that's a shame, because I think this movie has some good things going for it. I do think that Dave Bautista does give a good performance in the movie. And I will admit, I do like the idea and concept of a zombie movie taking place at a casino. That's a rather cool setting. And there is some nice bits of visual effects, but what lowers this movie is there's a lot of bad CGI in this movie, and Dave Bautista's character dies at the end of the movie, but he dies in one of the stupidest ways possible, and his death does not feel earned. Like really, that's how you end your movie? But just, yeah. Considering the fact that I really liked the Dawn of the Dead remake from 2004, and the fact that Zack Snyder was going to come back to do a zombie movie, I was excited, but man, ended up being a huge disappointment. I'm going to give Army of the Dead a 4 out of 10. Coming in at number 27. Now, from here on up, I'm pretty much positive on the rest of these movies. Coming in at number 27 is going to be The Crazies from 1973, directed by George Romero. Now, I do think this movie does have a good story to it, where you basically have this town with these infected, crazy people, basically zombies, and the whole military has to get people to safety, and they put them in this, it's a bunch of people wearing hazmat suits that have to put these people in a quarantine area for safety. So the movie does have a good story to it, but where this movie does fall a little low on me is I'm not a fan of the ending, because this movie teases a sequel and it never happened, which the remake does the same thing, but we'll get to that. Another issue I do have with the movie, I do think it is paced well for the most part, but it's a little slow in some areas, and some stuff could have been a little better developed. But other than that, The Crazies, while not one of my favorite zombie movies, it was not a bad movie by George Romero, but it is definitely on the weaker side, and I'll give The Crazies from 1973 a 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 26 is going to be The Crazies, the remake from 2010, directed by Brett Eisner. Now, pretty much the same thing I applied to the original movie. I think this movie has a good story going for it. And the reason I put the remake above the original is I do like the cast in this movie better. You got Timothy Olyphant as the lead character, who's like a police detective having to deal with all of this, which is interesting. You also got some really good production design, and I will say this movie does keep what you like about the original, but does some stuff a little better. But where this movie does kind of is lower on the list for me is, once again, I'm not a fan of the ending because the movie kind of teases a sequel and they never did one. There is some pretty bad CGI, and the pacing is good for the most part, but it's a little slow in some scenes. But other than that, The Crazies from 2010, solid horror remake, and I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 25 is a movie that I watched for the very first time today. This was the last movie I watched before doing that list, and that is the 2017 Japanese movie, One Cut of the Dead. Now, this is probably the most interesting choice that Cody Leach decided to put on the list, because it's a zombie movie, but it's not really a zombie movie, because, essentially, it's a movie about these people that are basically filming a zombie movie with their own crew and stuff like that. So essentially, it's more so that type of movie. There's not actual zombies in it, but I do think that this movie, for the concept it goes for, I do think it does work, but it's just not really the type of movie that now do not get me wrong, it is a good movie, but it just doesn't really have a whole lot of rewatch value, because, once you know what the twist is, I kind of feel like it loses a little luster, and there is some CGI bits that aren't the best in this movie, but overall, I liked this one for what it was. I'll give One Cut of the Dead a 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 24 is going to be Zombie Flesh Eaters, is going to be the 1979 Italian horror film Zombie, or as it's called in other countries, Zombie Flesh Eaters. Now, this is again an Italian film, and I do like this movie for what it is. The reason it's not higher is because, even though I do think it is a good movie, a part of it does feel like it is a little style over substance, as it is a good movie, but it doesn't have the best written characters. But this movie does have its standout moments. I mean, the whole part where you have a zombie that is on top of a police boat and a police officer is shooting at it. That's a rather cool scene. And I overall liked it for what it is, and I'll give Zombie Flesh Eaters a 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 23 is going to be the 2007 movie 28 Weeks Later, which is the sequel to 28 Days Later. Now, at one point, I did prefer this to the first movie, but obviously, that has changed over time. But what I like about this movie is how this movie takes place, not long after the first one. And the opening scene of this movie is rather intense, where you basically have a dad who is escaping the house because a whole group of fast zombies is chasing him and his family, but the dad leaves his family behind. And normally I would not like when a movie does that, but I think for this movie it works, because, let's be honest, if the dad would have stayed behind, he would have died with his whole family, so I don't blame him for running away. And I will say, this movie's got a rather good cast. You got Idris Elba, you got Jeremy Renner, and a few other actors in there. You have a group of kids who are the kids of Jeremy Renner, who are basically in this, you have these two group of kids who are basically in the military base being protected by the military from all the zombies and stuff like that. But where this movie does, why the movie's not higher on the list is, well, I just prefer the other movies above it more, simple as. And the kids, while I do think the kid actors do a good job with the material they are given, there are moments where they do make frustrating, dumb character decisions. And again, the whole ending you could look at as a downside because of the cliffhanger ending. But other than that, rather good movie from 2007, and I'll give this movie an 8 out of 10. Now, coming in at number 22 is going to be The New Kid on the Block, 28 years later. Now, I know this is a very divisive movie. This movie, it did receive positive reviews from critics, but like a mixed reaction from audiences. But I personally like this movie, and the reason I do prefer it over 28 Weeks Later is because I feel like with this movie, it goes back to the great character development that the first movie had. Because what I think makes the first 28 Days Later movie, which we will get to, work so well is not only is it a good, effective zombie horror movie, but I think that movie has a great group of characters. Here, I felt like this movie did a good job going back to that, and that's because Danny Boyle, who directed the first movie, came back to direct this one. And I like the whole story where you basically have a kid who goes with his mother and, has to get her to safety from all these zombies. Like, I think that that's a rather good story. Where this movie does fall a little flat, though, and why it's not higher on the list is because I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't seen the movie, but with the whole way that this movie ends, I am not a fan of the ending, and I do not like, and because of the way the movie ends, which I'm not going to spoil, I do not like the direction that they're hinting the next movie will go. And another thing, there is some editing that could have been better, but other than that, 28 Years Later is a pretty good legacy sequel. It's honestly one of the better legacy sequels to a horror movie, and I'm going to give 28 Years Later an 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 21, and now keep in mind, I do really like the rest of these movies, so don't get mad if your favorite movie's not higher, but coming in at number 21 is going to be the original Night of the Living Dead from 1968, directed by George Romero. Now, again, I do really like the most of the movies on this list, and this is a really good movie. This is definitely an important movie because without this movie, we would not have the zombie genre as we know it today. You would not have stuff like The Walking Dead TV show. You would not have Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. You would not have had Paranorman. You would not have had, Shaun of the Dead, one of my favorite comedies. You would not have had the Zombieland movies, but you just wouldn't really have all that without this movie. And when this movie came out, it was a big hit at the box office, and it was the first movie George Romero directed, and I think he did a rather good job with this movie. The only reason it's not higher for me is, now I know this might be a bit of a hot take, even though I do really like this movie. I know everybody praises the ending. Me, personally, now look, I get it. I understand what this movie's going for, and I understand that not all movies are going to have happy endings, but I'm not going to spoil how it ends for those who haven't seen it, but I'm not really a fan of the way this movie ends. I think the ending of this movie is way too abrupt, and the actress who played the character Barbara, I do think the actress was good, but her character did feel a little underdeveloped. That's personally why I prefer the Night of the Living Dead remake from 1990, directed by Tom Savini, which we will get to soon. But yeah. At the end of the day, this is still a really good movie. It's still a movie I'd recommend, and it's free on YouTube right now. I'm going to give the original Night of the Living Dead an 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 20, and I know some people are gonna roll their eyes, and I'm putting this above it, but it's my list. Coming in at number 20 is going to be the original Pet Sematary movie from 1989, which I owned in this Stephen King 4-movie collection. Now, I really like this movie, okay? Is it a perfect movie? No, it's got its flaws, but what I really like about this movie is the story. I like how this movie is about a dad. I like how this movie is about a family with the main character being a dad by the name of Lewis Creed, who he loses his son to a terrible accident, and their pet cat dies, but the dad, he basically goes to an Indian burial ground, buries his kid and the cat, and then they come back to life as zombies. I think that's a rather interesting, terrifying idea for a story. Now, again, this movie's not perfect. It does have its problems. Like, now, I do think that most of the acting is good, but there is, however, some scenes where there is some dated aspects to this. And I'm overall not a big fan of the ending. I think the ending of this movie is way too abrupt. But other than that, I like the original Pet Sematary, and it sits here at number 20. And I'm going to give it the same score that I gave Night of the Living Dead from 1968, which is an 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 19 is going to be Night of the Living Dead, the 1990 remake directed by Tom Savini. Yes, I am one of those few people that prefers this remake over the original. Now, do not get me wrong, the original Night of the Living Dead is a really good movie, but what I like about this remake more, Barbara was not a bad character in the original movie, but she did kind of feel a bit underdeveloped. What I like about this remake, I like how this movie develops Barbara and it makes her into a better character with this movie. I also really like this version of Ben because Ben was my favorite character in the original movie. I really like his version in this movie, played by Tony Todd, who is one of my favorite actors, so it's nice to see him in there. I also think, and I also like how this movie, it's pretty much, it pays respect to the original, but it also expands upon some ideas, which is what every good remake should do. And Tom Savini, who directed this movie, had close connections to George Romero, who he was friends with, so I think that really helped him in his favor directing this remake. So yeah, really good remake. I'm going to give Night of the Living Dead 1990 an 8 out of 10 as well. And I do think that it has a better ending. Coming in at number 18 is going to be Return of the Living Dead 2. Return of the Living Dead 2. Now, I absolutely love the 1985 zombie horror comedy, Return of the Living Dead, which you will see higher on the list. And while this movie is not as good as the first movie or even the third one, I still think that this is a good sequel, This movie, it pretty much takes, all the characters that you like from the original movie, it puts them in this movie, but it also introduces some new characters that the group of characters from the first movie, the great characters from the first movie, have to team up with a new group of characters to survive these zombies. And one thing I do think works really well about this movie is the comedy. Like for instance, I like the whole scene where there's a zombie's hand ripped off, but it's like in the road, and when the main group of survivors are driving their car away, the zombie's hand just basically flips them off of its middle finger. I thought that bit of humor was funny. And there is some really good practical effects in the movie. The only reason it's not higher is, well, because this movie ends on a cliffhanger, and secondly, now, most of the effects are good in the movie, but they're a little dated in some sequences. But other than that, Return of the Living Dead 2 is a rather good sequel. Not as good as the first or third movie, but still pretty good. And I'm going to give Return of the Living Dead 2 an 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 17 is going to be Zombieland Double Tap from 2019. Now, when it comes to the first Zombieland movie from 2009, I absolutely love that movie. I think that Zombieland from 2009 is a great comedy movie and one of my favorite modern day comedy movies. When it comes to the first Zombieland, what makes that movie work so well is what makes both the Zombieland movies work really well is you have a great set of characters played by a great cast. I mean, the first Zombieland movie alone, you have the main character Columbus, who is played by Jesse Eisenberg. You got Woody Harrelson, Emma Stone. You know, great characters and great cast that carried the movie. But Zombieland Double Tap is a pretty good sequel. It's not as good as the first movie because now the only downsides I do have to this sequel, I'm not a big fan of the ending because it does end on a cliffhanger, and it's been about 6 years since this movie came out, and no word on a third movie has been said yet. And another flaw I do have is that there are some CGI bits that aren't the best, but other than that, I really like Zombieland Double Tap. I think it's a rather good sequel. I think that the humor works really well, especially the opening scene where the main character Columbus, played by Jesse Eisenberg, he's basically narrating there's different types of zombies, including this one, Homer, and by that reference, he is basically referencing The Simpsons, but I personally thought that with the way they reference it, it was actually funny and clever. But yeah, pretty good sequel on the whole front, and I'm going to give Zombieland Double Tap an 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 16 is going to be the Dawn of the Dead remake from 2004. Now, I actually saw this movie before I saw the original. Now, when it comes to the remake, I saw the Dawn of the Dead remake in 2004. No, not 2004. That's when it came out. I saw this movie in 2021 when I rented it at the school library at downtown in Augusta, and, you know, I really liked it then. And then I watched the original movie the same year, but yeah, the remake is a rather good movie where you basically have a group of survivors that basically have to survive from zombies in a mall. I mean, that's a rather creative concept. And granted, it's not as good as the original movie, which we haven't gotten to yet, but rather good remake because I like how this movie, it keeps what you like about the original movie, but it also expands upon some ideas too. And I will say, I do like the idea of fast zombies because, in my opinion, the faster zombies are scarier than the slow ones. But yeah, really good remake on the whole front. I mean, especially the opening scene with the zombie baby, that was actually rather intense. But yeah, really good movie. Pretty good start to Zack Snyder's career. Definitely one of his better movies, and I'm going to give the Dawn of the Dead remake an 8 out of 10. The only reason it's not higher on the list is because there are some CGI bits I don't think are the best, and I'm also not a fan of the ending. I think the ending's a little too abrupt, but other than that, really good remake. It's an 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 15 is going to be the 2007 Spanish found footage horror film Rec, or in other words, basically Rec as in record. Now, I really like this movie, and what makes this movie work is its story and concept, where you basically have a group of characters that are basically trapped inside an apartment building, and the apartment building has been closed down, and they're basically trapped in this building because a bunch of people in hazmat suits have basically quarantined the place. And while this is going on, there is a group of fast zombies in this 10-story tall building that the group of characters have to survive. And one thing I do think works really well about this movie, I think this movie has really good atmosphere to it. Like, there were definitely some scary scenes that definitely got me. I will say that. The only reason this movie is not higher on the list, I'm not a fan of the abrupt ending, but other than that, Rec from 2007 is a rather good horror film. One of the better found footage movies because, like I said earlier in the movie, I'm not the biggest fan of found footage movies, but this right here is one of the few rare exceptions, and I'm going to give Rec a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 14 is going to be the movie Re-Animator. This is based on a 1927 book. With over 100 pages written by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, I've never read the book, but I really enjoyed this movie. Essentially, the premise to this movie, it's about this adult who's in his early 20s who basically works at a college campus, but his professor dies. However, as a science experiment, the main character basically uses technology to reanimate the corpse of his college professor's head. And I think that that's a rather interesting concept for a movie, you know. I think that the practical effects are really good. I think that Stuart Gordon does a rather good job directing this. Stuart Gordon was a very underrated director. He did this movie, he did From Beyond, from 1986, which, in my opinion, that's the best H.P. Lovecraft film adaptation. I know he did the movie Dagoon. Honestly, when it comes to Dagoon, I honestly could not get into that movie. I thought that this movie was much better, but yeah. Re-Animator, really good movie, gets a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 13 is going to be The Serpent and the Rainbow from 1988. Now, of all the movies that I was going to watch for the first time, this was the one I was the most excited to check out because, number one, I had never seen this movie before, and number two, it was directed by Wes Craven, who is one of my favorite horror movie directors of all time. If you're not familiar with Wes Craven as a director, he directed the 1984 horror movie A Nightmare on Elm Street, which, if you guys know me, I absolutely love the 1984 movie A Nightmare on Elm Street. And after this movie, Wes Craven would go on to have success, you know, directing movies like, for example, he directed the first 4 Scream movies, which, when it comes to the Scream movies, I really like the first 2 Scream movies. Not a fan of 3. 4, I think, is decent, and the 5th one sucked, but I really like the first 2 Scream movies directed by Wes Craven. Really like this movie and the original Nightmare on Elm Street, but I'm getting off track. Let's talk about the movie itself. But yeah, The Serpent and the Rainbow is a very good movie where the basic premise of this movie is this. You basically have an anthropologist played by Bill Pullman who goes to Haiti to... you basically have a movie about an anthropologist played by Bill Pullman who goes to Haiti so he can investigate a mysterious psychedelic drug that's turning people into zombies, which that's a rather interesting creative idea for a zombie movie. I think that the cast is rather good. I think this movie has a good creepy atmosphere to it, and I like Bill Pullman in the lead role. So yeah, really good movie. I'm gonna give The Serpent and the Rainbow a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 12 is going to be Return of the Living Dead 3. Now, tone-wise, this is probably now, of all the movies, this is probably one of the darker ones on the list, but what I really like about Return of the Living Dead 3 from 1993 is I like this movie's story, where you basically have this guy who's a teenager that lives with his dad, but his dad works in the military, but because there was a zombie attack in the lab, in the quarantine lab, basically the dad tells the son that him and his son have to leave town, but the son refuses, and basically this teenager, he goes out on a date with his girlfriend driving a motorcycle, but his girlfriend is in a rather terrible accident to where she dies, and he's absolutely devastated. So what he does is he basically brings his girlfriend to the lab to reanimate her and bring her back to life. But what I like about this movie is how the boyfriend's girlfriend in this movie, she does not become a full zombie right away like all the others. I mean, for example, if a person dies in this movie and they come back from the dead, like, you know, they'll be in full zombie mode trying to eat you. But what I like about this movie is how the girlfriend, she's not in full zombie mode right away. Like, she basically wakes up and she asks her boyfriend what happened and stuff like that. But throughout the course of the movie, the girlfriend has this really bad eating habit. She even bites a guy's arm in a store, and she's talking to her boyfriend how she's hungry throughout the whole movie, and she basically is not proud of what she's doing, but she cannot control her hunger, and the boyfriend is left with the difficult decision to basically him and his dad destroy her. But rather good story. But yeah, I really liked this movie. Return of the Living Dead 3, great movie, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 11 is going to be the 2018 movie Overlord, directed by Julius Avery, produced by J.J. Abrams. Now, I really like this movie. Essentially, it is a zombie movie set during World War II where a group of American soldiers basically have to fight off some German zombies during World War II, and I think that that's a rather interesting concept. I think that the special effects are pretty good. I think this movie has some good atmosphere. I think that the action scenes do work really well in the movie, and just, yeah, really good movie on the whole front. I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Zombieland from 2009. Now, I do own this movie on Blu-ray. The only reason I don't have it with me at the moment is because my sister borrowed it. But yeah, Zombieland from 2009. I mean, the movie's a modern-day classic. I mean, what more can I say about Zombieland that no one else has already said? It's a great movie, but essentially, the premise to Zombieland is where you basically have a socially awkward kid named Columbus, played by Jesse Eisenberg, who he's just this socially awkward kid trying to date a girl, but his girlfriend becomes a zombie. He has to defeat his girlfriend, and then he has to team up with a group of survivors, played by Emma Stone and Woody Harrelson, to survive the zombie apocalypse. And what I like about this movie, it's not really a horror movie. This is more of a comedy. This is more of like a comedy type of movie, and this is essentially, it's basically like Shaun of the Dead, where it's basically a spoof on the zombie genre, and I think this movie does a rather good job at it. I think that the humor is rather funny in this movie, especially the scene where Columbus, played by Jesse Eisenberg, like his girlfriend's a zombie trying to attack him, and then like he's scared like a little baby, and he just decides to chuck a toilet paper roll at her. Like, that scene's rather funny. The whole bit where Jesse Eisenberg's character, Columbus, he basically is inside of a mansion building, and he comes across a movie theater room with the projector playing Ghostbusters, and Bill Murray is sitting in there, but he's looking as pale as a ghost, and Columbus, played by Jesse Eisenberg, and Emma Stone, they freak out thinking he's a zombie. I thought that scene was funny. It just, yeah. And of course the whole quote, "It's time to nut up or shut up." Very iconic quote, and just, yeah. Zombieland's a great movie. I'm gonna give Zombieland a 9 out of 10. And I do hope we do get a third movie someday, because we need one, because 2 ends on a cliffhanger, and it's been 6 years. But yeah. Coming in at number 9 is going to be the 1985 movie Return of the Living Dead. This is easily the best of the Return of the Living Dead movies. Very good horror comedy movie. I think that this movie has some really good practical effects. I think that the movie has a really good story going for it, and just, yeah, really good movie on the whole front, that I definitely recommend for those who haven't seen it. It's currently free on Prime Video at the moment, and yeah, I enjoyed this movie when I watched it a few years ago, and rewatching it recently, I still really like this movie. But I'm going to give Return of the Living Dead a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Night of the Creeps from 1986. Now, this was a movie I was interested to check out because it was directed by Fred Decker, who directed the 1987 comedy movie The Monster Squad, which I really liked that movie. Sadly, he would go on to do RoboCop 3, which is not a good sequel, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. What I like about this movie is the creativity, where essentially the premise to this movie is this, where you basically have a group of aliens that basically arrive on Earth, but these aliens, they basically brain like these... I don't know how to describe it. They basically brain like this black... this black alien slug leech type of creature, multiple of them. But the thing is that if any of those leeches get inside your brain, you become infected and you turn into a zombie. I thought that was a rather creative idea for a zombie movie. I do like the first 10 minutes of this movie when this movie I do like the first 10 minutes of this movie when it takes place in the 1940s and it's in black and white, but the only reason they did that at the beginning is because, well, because it took place in the past, but then it cuts to present day where the rest of the movie's in color, which I thought that was rather clever. And I do like the main police detective character, who is played by Tom Atkins. Now, he's not the main character overall of the movie, but he does play a big part in it. But I like how Tom Atkins played a cop that had to team up with these kids to fight off the zombies. I thought that was rather cool. And just, yeah, Night of the Creeps is a classic, and I'm going to give the movie a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 7 is going to be the 1992 zombie movie, Braindead, or as it's called in other countries, Dead Alive. Now, this movie I was very excited to check out because it was directed by Peter Jackson, who directed the Lord of the Rings movies. And in my opinion, Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings The Two Towers, and Lord of the Rings Return of the King are all phenomenal movies. So when I heard Peter Jackson did a low-budget horror film, I'm like, ooh, I gotta check this out, and I really liked this movie. Now, he did a horror movie after this called The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox, which I've heard good things about that movie, but I've never seen it. But I do see it is free on Tubi, so I might watch it later today if I get time. We shall see. But I really liked this movie, and I really liked the story to this movie, Braindead, where essentially you basically have this guy who is in his either his late 20s or his early 30s, where he basically lives with his mom, but early on in the movie, his mom is at the zoo, and his mom is attacked by like a zombie rat type of creature, but slowly throughout the course of the movie, his mom starts to turn into a zombie, and a whole bunch of zombies come to the house, and just, yeah, really good movie on the whole front. I really like how this movie took inspiration from Evil Dead, but did its own thing with it. Only instead of it being people possessed by demons, it's actual zombies, which I thought was rather cool. And just, yeah, really good movie on the whole front. I'm glad I watched it, and I'm going to give Braindead a 9 out of 10. Coming in at and Braindead was a first-time watch for me as well. And so was Night of the Creeps, but yeah. And so was Serpent and the Rainbow. But let's get back to the video. And so was Zombie Flesh Eaters and One Cut of the Dead. But let's get back to the video. Coming in at number 6 is going to be yet another first-time watch for me, and that is the 2007 movie Planet Terror. Now, I was rather excited to check this movie out because it was directed by Robert Rodriguez, who is a director that I rather like. If you're not familiar with his work, he directed the 1995 movie Desperado starring Antonio Banderas, which I really like that movie. He also directed From Dusk Till Dawn and The Faculty, so when I heard that he was attached to this movie, I'm like, I gotta check it out, and I really liked Planet Terror. I essentially like how this movie, it's basically a story about a woman who loses her foot in a terrible accident. She's brought to the hospital, but this guy basically has to go rescue her, and later on in the movie, he basically replaces her foot with an AK-47, which I thought was rather cool, you know, because I really like the first 3 Evil Dead movies directed by Sam Raimi, and it's cool how in Evil Dead 2, Ash lost his hand, and, well, he replaced his hand with a chainsaw. But I like how in this movie, it's a chick that loses her foot and gets it replaced with an AK-47. I thought that was a rather interesting premise, but this movie's got a really good cast. You got Sean Bean, who was in The Terminator. You got Bruce Willis and Josh Brolin all together in one movie. I mean, when are you ever really going to see them in a horror movie aside from this? I can't think of any. Well, okay, Josh Brolin was in Weapons this year, which I did like, but that's besides the point. But, yeah, really good movie, and I'm going to give Planet Terror a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 5 for me is going to be the 2002 movie 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle. Now, I absolutely love this movie. Now, 28 Days Later is a rather interesting premise for a zombie movie. It was especially very unique for the time it came out, because until this point, you know, there never really was. I mean, there were zombie movies, don't get me wrong, but there were never really zombie movies about fast-moving zombies. And I like that this movie broke the mold a little bit. And I do like the concept of this movie, where you basically have a virus that's spread by a monkey called the rage virus, and it's very unique and different compared to diseases in other zombie movies where, like, for example, like, let's say that you survive a zombie attack, but, like, for example, like, let's say that, like, that either a zombie's spit or zombie's blood gets in your eyes. If that happens, you get infected and turn into a zombie right away. I thought, okay, that's a rather creative concept. And another thing that I think works really well about this movie is the cast and the characters. You know, like, you got Cillian Murphy as the lead character. You got Naomi Harris. You got Christopher Essen. You got Megan Burns and Braindead Glenson. So yeah, really good cast in this movie. And another thing I think works really well about this movie is the story and characters. Like, this is a great group of characters. Like, you care whether they survive or not. But yeah, love 28 Days Later. Excellent movie. Gets a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Day of the Dead from 1985, directed by George Romero. Not as good as Dawn of the Dead, the original, which we will get to soon, but I really like this movie. Now, what I really like about this movie is the concept where you basically have a group of survivors trapped in a military base having to fight off a huge horde of zombies. That's a rather interesting concept. I think that the practical effects are good. I think that Bud is a rather cool zombie in the movie, and just, yeah, excellent movie all the way around. Day of the Dead, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. And I hope that they put it back in theaters for its 40th anniversary this October, because if they do, I'm definitely seeing this in theaters. But yeah, gets a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Now, Scooby-Doo, everyone knows what it was. It was a very big cartoon property. It first began in the 1960s, but in the 1990s and even a little bit in the early 80s, like, there was a direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movie in the 80s, and it's so decent, you know, Scooby-Doo meets the Boo Brothers. It did decent, but it didn't, like, blow up sales. However, in 1998, Warner Bros. Made a direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movie called Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. And when that movie came out, it received positive reviews from critics and audiences and was a mega hit on VHS tape and DVD when it eventually came to DVD. But I really like this movie, and in my opinion, it's easily the best Scooby-Doo movie. And what I like so much about this movie, I like how it breaks the mold and does something a little different with Scooby-Doo, because, do not get me wrong, Scooby-Doo was great before then, but a lot of the time when they were going after a monster, it was always revealed to be a guy just in a mask. I like how this movie breaks the mold and does something a little different with it, where you find out that it's these actual zombies that the Scooby gang have to run away from. I thought, okay, that's a nice little change of pace, and yeah, really good movie, childhood classic, and it gets a 9 out of 10 from me. Coming in at number 2 is going to be the 2016 Korean film, To Busan. I absolutely love this movie. Now, what I really like about this movie is the story, where the basic premise is where you essentially have this dad by the name of Seok Woo, who basically goes on a train ride with his 9-year-old daughter to basically go visit Busan so the 9-year-old daughter can see her mom for her birthday, but a very fast, vicious group of zombies gets on the train, and it is a very intense survival movie where the dad has to protect his 9-year-old daughter from a bunch of zombies. Now, like I said, this is a Korean film, so if you're going to watch this movie, you're going to have to either A, watch it with English subtitles or watch an English dub version. Now, granted, when I watched this movie, I watched it with English subtitles because I prefer watching foreign films that way, but that's just me. But yeah, absolutely love Train to Busan. I really like the group of characters in this movie. And I will say, without spoiling much of this movie, it is definitely not afraid to get pretty emotional in certain scenes. I will say that. But yeah, love Train to Busan, gets a 10 out of 10. And I know there was a sequel to this called Peninsula, but I heard the second movie wasn't as good, and the reason it's not included on this list is because, well, Cody Leach didn't include it. But yeah, I'm just ranking the movies everyone else is doing for that list. But yeah, really good movie. And for me, coming in at number 1 is going to be the 1978 movie Dawn of the Dead, directed by George Romero. This movie is a timeless classic horror masterpiece. From the great character work, from the great characters to the great cast to the overall great story, where you essentially have a group of survivors trapped inside a mall where they have to fight off zombies. Really interesting premise for a movie, and it is just flawlessly executed here. From the music to the cast to the characters and the overall story, everything about this movie is perfection. And this is a movie that, yes, this movie is over 2 hours long, but it honestly does not feel like it because of how well paced it is. But yeah, great movie on the whole front. It gets a 10 out of 10, and it comes in at number 1 on this list. So yeah, I want to hear from you guys in the comment section down below. How would you rank the movies I've ranked on this list? Or at least the ones you've seen. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye now.